There are places on this planet where the light doesn't reach, not because the sun refuses to shine, but because the earth itself swallows it whole. The ocean is one of those places, and if you go deep enough, you stop being a visitor, you become prey. This is the story of a man who went down into the dark, and when he came back up, something came with him. His name was Marcus Delacroix, 34 years old, a commercial saturation diver working the oil fields off the coast of the North Sea. If you don't know what that means, let me paint the picture for you. Saturation divers are not your average scuba enthusiasts. These are the deep-sea laborers of the industrial world. They descend hundreds of feet below the surface, sometimes over 1,000, to repair pipelines, weld infrastructure, and maintain the massive rigs that keep our modern world running. They live in pressurized chambers for weeks at a time. They breathe mixed gases. They work in near-total darkness. And they do it all while the ocean presses down on them with a weight that could crush a car like a soda can. It's one of the most dangerous jobs on Earth. Marcus had been doing it for 11 years. He was known among his crew as Lucky Mark, not because he was reckless, the opposite actually. He was methodical, calm, the kind of guy who triple-checked his gear, who never cut corners, who treated the ocean with the respect it demanded. In an industry where one mistake could kill you and everyone around you, Marcus was the guy you wanted on your team. He'd survived equipment failures, close calls with nitrogen narcosis, a near miss with a collapsing scaffold at 600 feet. He'd earned his nickname. But luck, as they say, always runs out. October 14th, 2019. The North Sea was having one of its moods. Grey, cold, violent, waves like rolling mountains. The rig, Poseidon 7, was a floating fortress of steel and rust anchored above an oil field known locally as The Throat. The name wasn't official, but everyone who worked there used it, because the seabed in that region dropped off suddenly, plunging into a trench so deep that sonar had trouble mapping the bottom. It was a place where things got strange. Divers reported odd sounds on their comms, clicks, hums, low-frequency vibrations that seemed to come from nowhere. Compasses spun. Equipment malfunctioned more often than it should. There were stories, whispers, really, about divers seeing things in the dark, shapes that didn't belong, lights that moved with intention. But Marcus didn't believe in ghost stories. He believed in pressure, in physics, in the brutal, indifferent reality of the deep. On that particular day, his job was simple. Descend to 980 feet, inspect a section of pipeline for microfractures, report back. 4 hours max. He entered the diving bell at 06:47 a.m. His dive partner was a younger guy named Ollie Grant, 26, still green but eager. They'd worked together before. Marcus liked him. Ollie listened. He didn't showboat. The bell detached from the rig with a metallic groan and began its slow descent. Inside, the two men sat in silence, breathing the helium-oxygen mix that made their voices sound like cartoon characters. The pressure increased incrementally. The light from the surface faded. By the time they reached depth, the world outside the bell was black. Marcus checked his umbilical, his lifeline to the surface. Gas supply, good. Comms, clear. He gave Ollie a thumbs up and exited the bell. The moment he left, the cold hit him like a fist. Even through the hot water suit, the North Sea at that depth was hostile. Alien. He switched on his helmet-mounted lights, and twin beams cut through the murk. Silt drifted like snow. The pipeline stretched out before him, a massive steel serpent disappearing into the void. He began his inspection. Everything was routine, for the first 20 minutes at least. Then the comms crackled. "Mark, you seeing this?" It was Ollie, his voice tight. Marcus turned. Ollie was 30 feet away, his lights pointed down into the trench. "Seeing what?" "There's something down there, moving." Marcus swam over, irritation flickering in his chest. Rookies always thought they saw something, but when he looked down, he froze. There was something, a shape, massive. It was hard to make out. His lights couldn't penetrate that far, but it was there, darker than the water around it, and it was rising, slowly. Control, "This is Delta 2, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the ice forming in his gut. "We've got an unidentified object ascending from the trench, requesting immediate." The comms exploded with static. Then, nothing. What happened next is where the story fractures. Ollie Grant would later claim that the shape accelerated, that it came up fast, that Marcus turned to swim back to the bell, but something grabbed him, pulled him down. He said he saw Marcus's lights spinning, tumbling, vanishing into the dark. He said he screamed into the comms, but no one answered. He said he barely made it back to the bell alive. The surface crew said something different. They said they lost telemetry, that Marcus's vitals flatlined, that Ollie came up in the bell alone, hyperventilating, babbling about something in the water. They said Marcus Delacroix was gone. A saturation diver lost at 980 feet in the North Sea is, for all intents and purposes, dead. The pressure, the cold, the isolation. There's no surviving that. Not without your umbilical, not without gas. A search was conducted. Sonar, ROVs. For 3 days they scanned the trench. They found nothing. On the 4th day they called it. Marcus Delacroix was declared dead. His wife was notified, his 2 daughters. A memorial service was planned, and then, 11 days later, a fishing trawler 40 nautical miles north of Poseidon 7 hauled in its nets, and Marcus Delacroix came up with them. Alive, unconscious, hypothermic, but alive. His eyes were wide open, and according to the fishermen who found him, they never closed, not once. The fishermen who pulled Marcus Delacroix from the North Sea were experienced men. Captain Arvid Holgersen had been working those waters for 32 years. He'd seen bodies before, drowning victims, suicides. Once, a man who'd been missing for 6 months, so bloated and decayed that they had to identify him by his wedding ring. But he'd never seen anything like Marcus. He wasn't floating, Arvid would later tell investigators. He was just there, tangled in the net, but upright, like he'd been standing on the ocean floor and we just happened to scoop him up. The crew cut the net away carefully, expecting a corpse. Marcus's skin was gray, lips blue, his dive suit was shredded in places, exposing raw flesh beneath. There were lacerations across his torso, deep ones, like something with claws had tried to open him up, but his chest was moving, shallow, barely perceptible, but moving. Jesus Christ, he's breathing. They hauled him onto the deck. One of the younger crew members, Petter, started CPR. Not because Marcus wasn't breathing, he was, but because that's what you do. That's the protocol. Petter pressed down on Marcus's chest, and Marcus's eyes snapped to him. Not his head. His head didn't move, but his eyes, those pale gray eyes, locked onto Petter's face with an intensity that made the young man recoil. "He's awake," Petter stammered. He's looking at me." Arvid crouched down beside Marcus. "Can you hear me? Marcus, can you hear me?" No response. Just those eyes, staring, unblinking. Arvid waved a hand in front of Marcus's face. Nothing. He checked for a pulse. Weak, but there. He lifted one of Marcus's eyelids. It didn't need lifting. The eye was already open. "Get on the radio," Arvid said quietly. "Tell the Coast Guard we need an airlift. Now." Marcus Delacroix was airlifted to Haukeland University Hospital in Bergen, Norway, at 14:32 that same afternoon. The medical team that received him was briefed en route. Hypothermia, possible drowning, trauma, 11 days missing at sea. They were prepared for a miracle recovery story. They were not prepared for what walked through those doors, because Marcus wasn't unconscious anymore. He was sitting upright on the gurney, eyes open, staring straight ahead. Dr. Ingrid Halmstad, the attending physician, approached cautiously. "Mr. Delacroix, my name is Dr. Halmstad. You're in a hospital. You're safe. Can you understand me?" Nothing. She shone a penlight into his eyes, both pupils constricted normally. A good sign. But he didn't blink. Not once. "Get me a neurological workup," she said to the nearest nurse. "Full imaging, blood panel, and someone get his family on the phone." They wheeled Marcus into the ICU, and that's when things started to fall apart. The first anomaly was his body temperature. Normal human core temperature is around 98.6 degrees. Hypothermia is diagnosed when it drops below 95 degrees. Severe hypothermia, where the body begins to shut down, occurs below 82 degrees. Marcus's core temperature was 91.4 degrees. Cold, but not cold enough to explain 11 days in the North Sea. Dr. Halmstad frowned at the reading. Run it again. They did. Same result. How is he even conscious? One of the nurses whispered. The second anomaly was his lungs. When they performed the chest X-ray, they expected fluid, aspiration, signs of near drowning. His lungs were clear, completely clear. That's not possible, Dr. Halmstad muttered, staring at the image. He was underwater for days. Where's the water? The third anomaly was his skin. The lacerations, the deep gouges across his torso and arms, were already scabbed over. Edges dry. No signs of infection. Wounds that should have been raw and bleeding looked like they were a week into healing. But it had been less than 6 hours since he was pulled from the ocean. I want a full dermatology consult, Dr. Halmstad said, and run a metabolic panel. I need to know what's happening inside this man. By the time Marcus's wife Caroline arrived at the hospital, the medical team had more questions than answers. Caroline was a small woman with tired eyes and a grief that hadn't yet fully processed. She'd buried her husband in her mind 11 days ago, and now he was back. Dr. Halmstad met her outside the ICU. Is he really alive? Caroline's voice cracked. Yes, Dr. Halmstad said carefully. But I need to prepare you. He's not responsive. He's awake, but he's not speaking. He's not reacting to stimuli. And there are some unusual findings we're still trying to understand. Caroline nodded, tears streaming down her face. Can I see him? Of course. They walked into the room together. Marcus was sitting up in the hospital bed, his hands resting on his lap. His head was tilted slightly forward. His eyes were open, staring at the wall. Caroline gasped. Mark. She moved to his side, taking his hand in hers. It was cold, clammy. Marcus, it's me. It's Caroline. Baby, can you hear me? Nothing. She squeezed his hand. Please say something. For a long moment there was only silence. And then Marcus's head turned, slowly, mechanically, until he was looking directly at her. Caroline's breath caught, because his eyes, those eyes that used to crinkle at the corners when he smiled, that used to light up when he saw his daughters, were empty, not blank, not unconscious, empty, like he was looking through her. Mark, she whispered. His lips parted, and in a voice that sounded like gravel scraping against metal, he said, It's still down there. Caroline screamed. Dr. Halmstad rushed in, pulling her back as Marcus's head slowly returned to its original position, his gaze settling once again on the far wall. What did he say? Dr. Halmstad asked urgently. What did he say? Caroline was sobbing, shaking. He spoke. He said something still down there. The medical team exchanged glances. Marcus hadn't spoken since he was brought in. Not a word, not a sound. And now this. Dr. Halmstad approached Marcus carefully. Mr. Delacroix, can you repeat that? What's still down there? No response. She waved a hand in front of his face. Nothing. Marcus, please. We need to understand what happened to you. Still nothing. Just those open eyes, staring, unblinking. Over the next 72 hours, the medical team ran every test they could think of. MRI, CT scan, EEG, toxicology, psychiatric evaluation. The results were confusing. His brain activity was normal. No signs of stroke, hemorrhage, or structural damage. His blood work was unremarkable. No infections, no toxins. But he wouldn't close his eyes. Not to sleep. Not to blink. Nurses reported that they'd check on him at 2 a.m., 4 a.m., 6 a.m., and every single time he was sitting in the exact same position, eyes wide open, staring at nothing. One nurse, Astrid, claimed she saw him lean forward slightly one night and whisper something. She couldn't make out the words, but she said it sounded like he was counting. On the fourth day, Caroline brought their daughters to visit. Emma, age 9, Sophie, age 6. They were scared, confused. Their father had been dead, and now he wasn't. But he also wasn't Dad. Caroline held their hands as they entered the room. Marcus was in his usual position, sitting, staring. "Girls," Caroline said softly, "say hello to Daddy." Emma stepped forward first, her voice small. "Hi, Daddy." "Nothing." Sophie started to cry. "Why won't he look at us?" And then Marcus's eyes shifted. Not his head, just his eyes. They slid sideways in their sockets, slow and deliberate, until they locked onto Sophie. The little girl froze. Marcus's mouth opened, and he whispered, "Don't go in the water." The recording exists. That's the thing people don't realize. When something like this happens, something that doesn't fit into the neat little boxes we use to organize reality, there's always a recording. Security footage, body cams, black box data. In Marcus Delacroix's case, it was his dive computer. The device was still strapped to his wrist when the fisherman pulled him from the water. Waterproof, shockproof, designed to survive the most extreme conditions on Earth. And it had. Dr. Peterson, a hyperbaric specialist brought in by the oil company's insurance investigators, was the first to examine it. He sat in a sterile conference room at Poseidon 7's mainland offices, laptop open, fingers hovering over the keyboard. The data should have been corrupted. 11 days submerged. The pressure, the cold. But when he accessed the logs, everything was there. Depth readings, time stamps, gas mixture ratios, heart rate monitoring, and something else. Something that made Dr. Peterson's hands go still. The dive computer tracked Marcus's descent normally. 0 feet, 200 feet, 500 feet, 980 feet. His heart rate remained steady, 68 BPM, textbook calm for a veteran diver. At 06:52 a.m., the logs showed him exiting the diving bell and beginning his inspection. Everything normal, until 07:14 a.m., that's when his heart rate spiked. 68 BPM to 142 BPM in less than 10 seconds. The depth reading began to fluctuate wildly. 980 feet, 1,020 feet, 1,340 feet. He was descending, fast, too fast. Dr. Peterson leaned closer to the screen, his pulse quickening. At 07:16 a.m., Marcus reached a depth of 2,187 feet. That's impossible. The human body, even one in a pressurized suit, breathing mixed gases, cannot survive that depth. The pressure alone would cause immediate nitrogen narcosis, oxygen toxicity, and eventual implosion of the lungs. But the logs didn't stop. 2,187 feet, 2,410 feet, 2,650 feet, and his heart rate, it began to slow. 142 BPM, 130, 115, 98. By the time the depth reading hit 3.4 feet, Marcus's heart rate was 54 BPM, lower than when he started the dive, like he was relaxed. Dr. Peterson scrolled further. The logs continued for 6 more hours. During that time, Marcus's depth remained stable at just over 3,000 feet. His heart rate hovered between 50-60 BPM. His gas consumption was minimal, far below what it should have been. It was as if he wasn't breathing, or didn't need to. At 13:27 p.m., the depth reading began to rise again, slowly at first, then faster, 3,004 feet, 2,800 feet, 2,200 feet, 1,600 feet. By 14:02 p.m., Marcus was back at 980 feet, and then the logs just stopped. No malfunction warning, no error code, just silence. For 11 days, Dr. Peterson sat back in his chair, his mind racing. He ran the data through 3 separate analysis programs. He checked for firmware corruption, data spoofing, electromagnetic interference. Nothing. The logs were clean, which meant one of 2 things. Either the dive computer had experienced a catastrophic failure that somehow left the data intact and perfectly formatted, or Marcus Delacroix had actually descended to 3,000 feet, stayed there for 6 hours, and survived. Dr. Peterson reached for his phone. He needed to call someone. But who do you call when the data says the impossible happened? Meanwhile, back at Haukeland University Hospital, the psychiatric evaluation of Marcus Delacroix was underway. "Doctor," Emil Anderson, a clinical psychologist specializing in trauma and dissociative disorders, sat across from Marcus in a quiet observation room. Marcus was in his usual position, sitting upright, hands on his lap, eyes open, staring at the wall. Dr. Anderson had reviewed the case file. Near-death experience, prolonged isolation, potential hypoxia. The mind does strange things when it's deprived of oxygen, warmth, and sensory input. Catatonia wasn't uncommon in severe trauma cases. But this was different. Mr. Delacroix, Dr. Anderson said gently. My name is Emil. I'm here to help you. I know you've been through something traumatic, something your mind is still trying to process, and that's okay. We're going to take this slow. No response. Dr. Anderson picked up a small stress ball from the table. I'm going to place this in your hand. I'd like you to squeeze it if you can hear me. He placed the ball in Marcus's palm. Nothing. The ball sat there, untouched, as Marcus's hand remained perfectly still. Dr. Anderson made a note. No voluntary motor response to external stimuli. Can you tell me what you remember? Dr. Anderson continued. About the dive? About what happened down there? Silence. Dr. Anderson leaned forward slightly. You spoke to your wife. You said something was still down there. Can you tell me what you meant? For a long moment, nothing happened. And then, Marcus's lips moved. Barely. Just a faint tremor. Dr. Anderson's breath caught. Marcus, can you repeat that? The lips moved again. This time a sound emerged. Faint, hoarse. Watching. Dr. Anderson blinked. What's watching, Marcus? Silence. Marcus, please, what's watching? Marcus's eyes shifted. Slowly, deliberately, until they locked onto Dr. Anderson's face. And in that same gravelly, broken voice, Marcus whispered, all of us. The interview was terminated shortly after. Dr. Anderson's report noted acute dissociative symptoms and possible delusional ideation. He recommended sedation, extended observation, and a neurology consult to rule out organic brain damage. But privately, in the margins of his notes, he wrote something else. Patient demonstrates awareness inconsistent with catatonic presentation. Eye contact deliberate. Speech content suggests underlying terror, not delusion. Recommend caution. He didn't share that with anyone, because he couldn't explain it. But Dr. Anderson had been working in psychiatry for 19 years. He'd interviewed schizophrenics, trauma survivors, people in the grip of full psychotic breaks, and he knew the difference between a mind that was broken and a mind that had seen something. On the 7th day of Marcus's hospitalization, Ollie Grant came to visit. He didn't want to. His hands shook as he walked through the hospital corridors. He'd barely slept since the incident. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw it. That shape in the water, rising, and Marcus, tumbling, vanishing. He'd given his statement to the investigators. He'd told them everything, but he'd left one detail out, because he didn't think they'd believe him, and because saying it out loud would make it real. Ollie stopped outside Marcus's room. Through the small window in the door, he could see him, sitting up, eyes open. Ollie's stomach twisted. He pushed the door open. The room was quiet except for the faint beeping of the heart monitor. Marcus didn't move as Ollie entered, didn't acknowledge him at all. Hey, Mark, Ollie said, his voice cracking. It's me, Ollie. Nothing. Ollie stepped closer, his heart pounding. I don't know if you can hear me, but I needed to see you. I needed to know that you were okay. Marcus's eyes remained fixed on the far wall. Ollie swallowed hard. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I left you down there. I thought you were gone. Marcus's head turned, slowly, until he was looking directly at Ollie. Ollie froze. Marcus's mouth opened, and in that same broken, inhuman voice he said, You saw it too. Ollie's blood ran cold. What are you talking about? Marcus's eyes didn't blink. You saw it rise. Ollie took a step back, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. It wasn't the first time. Stop, Ollie whispered. Please stop, and it won't be the last. Ollie turned and ran. He didn't stop until he was outside the hospital, doubled over in the parking lot, vomiting onto the asphalt. Because Marcus was right. He had seen it, And there was something else, something he hadn't told anyone. The shape in the water, when it rose, he'd seen lights, deep down in the trench, flickering, pulsing, like something was breathing. 3 weeks after Marcus Delacroix returned from the deep, the oil company made a decision. They were shutting down Poseidon 7. Officially, it was described as routine decommissioning due to declining field productivity. The press release was dry, corporate, forgettable, but the workers knew better. Because 2 days before the announcement, something happened at the rig that didn't make it into any official report. Another diver went down. His name was Kenneth Rourke, 41, Australian, 15 years of deep-sea experience. He was part of the salvage team sent to retrieve Marcus's umbilical and any remaining equipment from the dive site. Standard recovery operation. Kenneth descended to 980 feet at 09:15 a.m. At 09:43 a.m., his voice came through the comms. Calm at first. "Control, this is Kilo 1. I've located the umbilical. It's shredded. Looks like it was cut." The surface operator, Daniels, responded immediately. "Cut? You mean severed?" "No. Cut. Clean edges, multiple points. Like something went through it with scissors." Daniels frowned. "That doesn't make sense. Confirm visual." "I'm looking right at it. It's..." Kenneth stopped mid-sentence. Silence. "Kilo 1, do you copy?" "Nothing." Kenneth, respond. 10 seconds of static. Then Kenneth's voice came back, quieter, tense. "Control, there's something written here." "Written? Written where?" "On the pipeline. Someone carved something into the steel." Daniels exchanged a glance with the other operators in the control room. "What does it say?" Another pause. When Kenneth spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "It says 3,000 feet, not alone." Kenneth Rourke was pulled from the water 14 minutes later. He was conscious, coherent, but he refused to go back down. "I'm done," he told the crew supervisor. "Pay me out. I'm off this rig." "Ken, what the hell did you see down there?" Kenneth looked at him with eyes that had gone flat. "Empty. I didn't see anything, but I felt it, watching me. The whole time I was down there, I felt it." He left Poseidon 7 that same day. He never dove again. The inscription was photographed by an ROV the following morning. The images were uploaded to a secure server and immediately classified by the oil company's legal team. But copies leaked. They always do. On forums dedicated to deep-sea diving, maritime mysteries, and unexplained phenomena, the photos began to circulate. The words were there, carved into the steel in crude, jagged letters. 3,000 feet, not alone. The handwriting, if you could call it that, was uneven, shaky, like whoever carved it had been doing so in the dark, with numb fingers, while the ocean pressed down on them from all sides. Experts weighed in. Some said it was a hoax, a prank by a bored diver. Others pointed out that carving into industrial-grade steel at 980 feet in near-freezing water with limited visibility would require tools and time that no diver had during a standard operation. And then there were the people who asked the question no one wanted to answer. Who carved it? Because Marcus's dive knife was found still clipped to his belt when he surfaced, unused. Back at the hospital, Marcus's condition wasn't improving. If anything, it was getting worse. The nurses had started referring to him as the statue. He never moved unless prompted, never ate unless fed, never slept. But he was aware. Dr. Halmstad confirmed it through a series of neurological tests. Marcus's brain was processing information. He could track objects with his eyes. He responded to painful stimuli with subtle flinches. But he wouldn't, or couldn't, speak, except for those brief, cryptic moments. "It's still down there. Don't go in the water. All of us." Each phrase delivered in that same flat, emotionless tone. On the 23rd day of his hospitalization, Caroline made the decision to bring him home. The doctors advised against it. Marcus required round-the-clock care, monitoring, psychiatric intervention. But Caroline was exhausted, financially drained, and her daughters needed their father, whatever was left of him. "I'll take care of him," she told Dr. Halmstad. "Whatever he needs, I'll do it." Dr. Halmstad hesitated, then nodded. All right, but if anything changes, if he becomes a danger to himself or others, you call us immediately. Caroline agreed. Marcus was discharged on a gray, rainy afternoon in early November. He sat in the passenger seat of Caroline's car, staring straight ahead as they drove through the winding roads of the Norwegian countryside. Caroline glanced at him every few seconds, her hands tight on the wheel. "We're going home, Mark," she said softly. "The girls are so excited to see you. Emma made you a card. Sophie picked out your favorite meals for the week." No response. "I know this is hard. I know you're somewhere else right now. But we're going to get through this. Together, okay?" Marcus's eyes didn't move, but his lips did. Just barely. "It followed me." Caroline's breath caught. "What?" "It followed me up." She pulled the car over, her heart hammering. "Marcus, what are you talking about? What followed you?" For the first time since he'd returned, Marcus turned his head to look at her, and his eyes, those empty, unblinking eyes, locked onto hers. "It's in the water, all the water. It's waiting." Caroline's hands trembled. Waiting for what? Marcus's mouth opened, but before he could answer, his head snapped forward, his gaze returning to the windshield, and he was silent again. That night, after Marcus was settled into bed, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, Caroline sat at the kitchen table with a bottle of wine and her laptop. She'd been avoiding it, the search, but she couldn't anymore. She typed, "Deep sea diving accidents, North Sea 2019. Dozens of results, missing divers, equipment failures, decompression incidents, nothing unusual." She refined the search. Poseidon 7 rig incidents. A few news articles. One about a minor fire in 2017. Another about a labor dispute. And then, a blog post, written by a former Poseidon 7 worker named Hugh Tennant. The post was dated 3 years before Marcus's dive. The title, "Why I'll Never Go Back to the Throat." Caroline clicked it. Hugh's account was rambling, paranoid even, but certain details jumped out. He described strange occurrences during his time on the rig, equipment malfunctions, divers reporting auditory hallucinations on deep dives, lights in the water that couldn't be explained. But the part that made Caroline's skin crawl was this: "There's something down there. I don't know what it is, but it's old. Older than the rig, older than the oil, maybe older than the ocean itself. The local fishermen know about it. They call it Dipet, the deep. They won't fish near the throat. They say it takes people, not all at once, slowly, one at a time. And when it gives them back, they're not the same." Caroline scrolled down. There was a list. Names. Divers who had worked at Poseidon 7 over the years, and next to each name, a note. Eric Johansson, 2011. Disappeared during routine dive. Body never recovered. Liam Cross, 2013. Survived equipment failure at 200 feet. Quit diving. Committed suicide 6 months later. Anatoly Koval, 2015. Found floating near the rig. Alive but unresponsive. Died in hospital 3 weeks later. Cause of death: unexplained cardiac arrest. Marcus Delacroix, 2016. Caroline's blood went cold, but Marcus's accident was in 2019. She scrolled back up, rereading the date on the post. Posted August 4th, 2016, 3 years before Marcus went down. How did Hugh Tennant know Marcus's name? Caroline's hands were shaking as she typed Hugh Tennant's name into a search engine. The results loaded, and her stomach dropped. The first link was an obituary. Hugh Tennant, 1971-2017. Beloved father and husband. Died peacefully at home. Caroline clicked through to the full notice. It was sparse, generic, but there was a line near the end that made her breath catch. Hugh struggled with anxiety and depression in his final years, particularly following his work as a commercial diver in the North Sea. He is remembered by those who knew him as a kind soul who faced his demons with courage. Caroline closed the laptop. She sat in the dark kitchen, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall. Upstairs, Marcus was lying in bed, eyes open, watching the ceiling, and for the first time since he'd come back, Caroline realized something. She didn't want to know what he saw down there, because whatever it was still with him. 6 months passed. Marcus Delacroix never closed his eyes. Not once. The medical community had no explanation. Dr. Halmstad published a case study in an obscure Scandinavian medical journal, carefully avoiding any mention of the dive itself. She focused on the physiological anomaly, a patient capable of maintaining consciousness indefinitely without REM sleep. It shouldn't be possible. The human brain requires sleep to function. Without it, cognition deteriorates, hallucinations set in. Eventually, the body shuts down. But Marcus's brain scans remained normal. His cognition, what little he demonstrated, was intact. It was as if some fundamental rule of biology had been rewritten, and no one could explain why. Caroline did her best. She truly did. She hired a private nurse. She rearranged the house to accommodate Marcus's needs. She read to him, played music, showed him photos of their daughters. Sometimes he would turn his head toward the sound of her voice. Sometimes his fingers would twitch, but he never spoke again, except once. It was late April, a warm evening. Caroline had opened the windows to let in the spring air. She was folding laundry in the bedroom while Marcus sat in his chair by the window, staring out at the fjord beyond their property. The water was calm, glassy, reflecting the fading sunlight. Caroline glanced at him, and for a moment, just a fleeting, fragile moment, she saw something in his expression. Not emotion exactly, but recognition, like he was seeing something she couldn't. "Mark," she said softly. "What is it? What do you see?" His lips moved, and in that broken, distant voice he whispered, "They're coming up." Caroline felt ice flood her veins. "Who's coming up?" Marcus didn't answer. His eyes remained fixed on the water. Emma and Sophie learned to live around their father's silence. At first, they asked questions. Why doesn't Daddy talk anymore? Why doesn't he sleep? Is he going to get better? Caroline gave them answers that were kind, hopeful, lies mostly. But children are perceptive. They knew. Emma, now 10, stopped asking. She avoided the room where Marcus sat. She threw herself into school, into friends, into anything that kept her away from the hollow shell of the man who used to read her bedtime stories. Sophie, just 7, handled it differently. She would sit with him, not close, but near enough. She would draw pictures at the kitchen table while Marcus sat by the window, and every so often she'd glance over at him as if checking to make sure he was still there. One evening, Caroline found Sophie standing in front of Marcus, holding up a crayon drawing. "Look, Daddy," Sophie said quietly. "I drew the ocean. See? That's you. You're a diver. And that's the big fish you told me about once. Remember?" Marcus didn't move. Sophie lowered the drawing, her small face crumpling. "I miss you," she whispered. And then Marcus's hand moved, slowly, trembling. It reached out, and his fingers brushed the edge of the paper. Sophie gasped, "Daddy?" But the hand fell back to his lap, and Marcus returned to stillness. Sophie looked up at Caroline, her eyes wide and desperate. "He touched it, Mama. He touched my drawing." Caroline knelt down, pulling Sophie into her arms. "I know, sweetheart, I know." But inside, Caroline was breaking because she didn't know how much longer she could do this. By August, the marriage was over. Not officially. Caroline didn't file for divorce, didn't move out. But emotionally, she'd already left. She'd stopped sleeping in the same room as Marcus, stopped trying to reach him, stopped believing he would come back. Because the truth she couldn't say out loud, was simple. Marcus Delacroix had drowned in the North Sea. What came back wasn't him. It was something else, something wearing his face. In September, a documentary filmmaker named Astrid Moen reached out to Caroline. Astrid had been researching deep-sea diving incidents for a project on industrial accidents in extreme environments. She'd come across Marcus's case and wanted to interview the family. Caroline said no. Astrid persisted, gently, respectfully. "I'm not trying to exploit your pain," Astrid said over the phone, "but your husband's story, it's important. There are things happening out there, on those rigs, in those depths, that people need to know about." Caroline was silent for a long time. Then she said, "What do you think happened to him?" Astrid hesitated. "Honestly, I don't know, but I've spoken to other divers, other families, and there's a pattern. People go down into certain places, trenches, deep water sites, areas with geological anomalies, and when they come back, they're changed." "Changed how?" "Like something followed them up." Caroline closed her eyes. "I can't help you," she said quietly. "I'm sorry." She hung up, but Astrid's words stayed with her. "Like something followed them up." On October 14th, 2020, exactly 1 year after Marcus's dive, Caroline woke to find his chair empty. She bolted upright, her heart pounding. "Marcus?" She searched the house, the kitchen, the bathroom, the girls' rooms. He wasn't there. Panic rising, she ran outside. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting the fjord in hues of pink and gold. And there, at the edge of the water, was Marcus, standing, his bare feet in the shallows, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Marcus!" Caroline screamed, running toward him. He didn't move. She grabbed his arm, pulling him back from the water. "What are you doing? You can't—" He turned his head, and for the first time in a year, she saw something in his eyes. Not emptiness, terror. His mouth opened and he spoke, not in that broken, gravelly whisper, but in his own voice, the voice she remembered, the voice she'd loved. "Caroline, I can hear it, calling, from the deep. It wants me to come back." Tears streamed down Caroline's face. No, you're staying here, with me, with the girls. You're not going anywhere." Marcus's hand reached up, trembling, and touched her cheek. "I never left," he whispered. "I've been down there the whole time. What you've been talking to, that's not me. That's what it left behind." Caroline's breath hitched. "I don't understand." "I'm still there, Caroline. At 3,000 feet in the dark, and I can feel it, pulling me deeper." "Marcus, please, tell the girls I love them." And then, his eyes went empty again. The light, the brief, desperate humanity, vanished, and Marcus walked into the water. Caroline screamed. She tried to pull him back, but he was stronger than he should have been. He waded deeper. The water rose to his knees, his waist, his chest, and then he stopped. He stood there, submerged to his shoulders, staring out at the endless expanse of the fjord. Caroline collapsed on the shore, sobbing. The authorities were called. A rescue team arrived within the hour. They waded out to Marcus and guided him back to shore. He didn't resist. He was placed under psychiatric observation at a secure facility in Oslo. Caroline never visited. She couldn't, because the man they pulled from the water that day wasn't her husband. It was a shell, a placeholder, for something that was still down there, waiting. 3 years later, Poseidon 7 was fully decommissioned. The rig was dismantled. The trench, the throat, was marked as a no-dive zone due to geological instability. But the fishermen still avoid it. And sometimes, late at night, when the water is calm and the fog rolls in, they report seeing lights, deep below the surface, flickering, pulsing, like something breathing. Marcus Delacroix remains in psychiatric care. He sits in a chair by a window overlooking the North Sea. His eyes are open, always open, and sometimes the nurses report. He whispers the same words, over and over. 3,000 feet, not alone, they're coming up. The question we're left with, here's what keeps me awake at night. Not the mystery of what Marcus saw, not the impossibility of his survival, but this: what if he's right? What if there is something down there, in the places we've never fully explored, in the depths we can't reach, in the dark we can't illuminate? What if the ocean, this vast alien world that covers 70% of our planet, isn't empty? What if it's watching? And what if every time we send someone down into the deep, we're not exploring, we're knocking, and sooner or later, something's going to answer? Marcus Delacroix surfaced from the North Sea on October 25, 2019, but a part of him never came back. And whatever took his place, it's still waiting, still watching, still open, because some doors, once opened, can never be closed, and some depths were never meant to be disturbed. The ocean keeps its secrets, but sometimes it gives them back, and when it does, we wish it hadn't. This has been the story of Marcus Delacroix, The diver who surfaced, but whose eyes never closed again. Sleep well if you can.